Hello, also from my side. As was already introduced. My name is Alexander. I will be speaking on the AI requirements for high-risk AI systems or products in healthcare, adding, I think, to the very extensive list of rules and regulations to keep in mind when you come from an MDR background. So let's jump right in and give you a little bit of background of who am I representing and where do we come from. And we usually like to start this introduction by referring to Amara's law, saying that we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. And I think AI is probably a very good example of this, with a lot of hype being in this whole space at the moment, which is always balanced out by other factors. But at the same time, if you go down the timeline and start thinking about something like super intelligence or these alignment questions, the effect can get quite big. And so striking the right balance with AI and AI regulation is exactly what we're doing here at the TÜV AI Lab. Our claim is to unlock trust in AI, and we are a joint venture of the 5 TÜV companies, TÜV Süd, TÜV Rheinland, TÜV Nord, TÜV Hessen, and TÜV Thüringen. And our goal is to build up notified body AI capacities by translating the regulatory requirements into practice. And this includes the development of test criteria and test methods, the prototyping of future certification processes, and contributing to norms and standards so that we can work towards our vision, which is making Europe or helping Europe become a hotspot for trustworthy AI. So that's enough with the background. Let's jump right into the topic of why you are all here, the upcoming EU AI Act. And if you look into the AI Act, I think especially coming from a medical device regulations perspective, you will see that a lot of the requirements that are there are not new to medical device manufacturer. The AI specific component is definitely new and challenging, and that's why the Act was written in the first place. But if you start looking into the Act, you have to ask yourself the same question as was asked previously. Step number one: do you even classify as an AI system according to the AI Act? Which is, there's a lengthy definition. The EU Commission has also just published guidelines, but that's the first question you have to ask yourself: what kind of system are you developing? And is it an AI system according to the AI Act? The second important question that you need to be able to answer is, which role are you? Are you a provider of an AI system? AKA, are you working on developing and bringing to the market your own system? Or are you just deploying a system that somebody else has produced? These has different regulatory consequences. And the last one is the question of which risk class does my AI system belong to? I have another slide in a couple of minutes that show the risk classes, but these two factors then determine the requirements that are in the AI Act. We will also have them listed in a second, but I mentioned a couple of here, like robustness, transparency, risk management, quality management. Many of them I think are well known, some of them are new. And the combination of the first questions also determines in what kind of bucket you fall at the end. So is it necessary to go through a third-party assessment by a notified body? Can you do an internal assessment, or is no assessment mandatory at all? And since we are in the medical space, and if your system classifies as an AI system according to the AI Act, your system falls under Annex 1. And Annex 1 is a high-risk system where it was already necessary to go through independent third-party assessment. You saw the slide earlier. If you are basically anything upwards from class 2A with some speciality about class 1 devices, but roughly speaking, if you are class 2A or higher, you need to go through a third-party conformity assessment. And the AI Act is written in a way where it says, according to your original legislation, before the Act existed, you have already been high risk and have therefore had the need to be assessed by an independent third party. This is still the same thing here. Internal assessment by providers is only possible for devices that fall under Annex 3. So these are devices in HR and critical infrastructure, in law, in finance. And there's a whole list. If you look into Annex 3, you'll find them. And no assessment is not applicable to high-risk AI systems. So let's look at the 4 risk classes of the AI Act. We're starting with prohibited risks or prohibited systems pose unacceptable risks. And these are prohibited from being put into practice. And an example that's given here is social scoring, for example. The risk class that is most important, I assume for everybody here, is the high risk class, with the requirements laid out between Article 8 and Article 15 for your high risk medical devices. And the bottom 2 is colloquially called limited risks and minimal risks. They are not explicitly written in the Act. So the Act specifically defines a class of prohibited systems and defines the classification for high-risk systems. And if you don't fall in either of the 2 categories, then there are no requirements for the AI Act. Anyways, if you have these transparency obligations if you fall into this limited risk category, so you are not high risk and not prohibited, but you are interacting with human beings, you are displaying some text or images, and there is the obligation to make it transparent that an AI system has been used here. And if you don't do that, you fall in the lower minimal risk class, and there's no obligations. The commission is working on voluntary guidelines that you can follow, but there is no specific obligations. What I would say a challenge for the AI Act as it was written, as it was discussed, was the release of ChatGPT. Because if you look at these risk classes here, you might ask yourself the question, I'm always talking about AI systems, but what about these bigger models that companies like OpenAI are working on? This is what the AI calls general purpose AI and foundation models. They came in very late, and so they don't fit quite neatly into this distinction between the risk classes. But what you have is general purpose AI systems, which are trained on, I think it's defined as large volumes of data with a general purpose use. So as we were talking in the first part about the intended use, that's so important to classify you as a medical device. It's also important here to be classified as a foundation model and a GPAI model, that you don't have a very specific use. And then according to the AI Act, you are either classified as a system with systemic risk. These are very large systems that are trained on large amounts of compute, or without systemic risk, and this also changes your regulatory requirements a little bit. We won't focus on GPA and foundational models going forward, because marked here in blue is the requirements for medical devices. And if you were to put MDR and AI Act side by side, that would be a graphical representation of what we are talking about, assuming that you don't fall into any of these class 1 devices that don't need a notified body approval. They're a very special case, so we ignore them for the second, and we can focus on these very clear cases of class 2A, class 2B, and class 3 devices, which also fall under the class high-risk AI system under the AI Act. That's the combination where the requirements both of the MDR and the AI Act need to be taken into consideration. So what are the requirements for providers of high-risk AI systems? I've grouped them into 4 different groups. The first one is a range of technical criteria. laid out in Article 14 and 15, which especially Article 15 refers to robustness, performance, and cybersecurity. And Article 14 speaks of human oversight. The second bucket are ethical criteria, under which I have grouped data governance in Article 10. Also the requirement for bias and to check for bias and non-discrimination, also in Article 10. And the obligation for transparency, already mentioned, which you will find in Article 13. The first row is mostly focused on the product case, but as the title is saying here as well, for providers of high-risk AI systems. So there are some additional requirements for you as a provider, which refer to documentation, for example. And here you have to draft up a technical documentation, which is specified in Article 10. Article 12 mentions logging capabilities of your AI device so that during its runtime, it logs its activity, which you can then use for traceability or for debugging for these types of questions. It's also required that you keep important regulatory documents for a period of time and that you register your AI device. Probably nothing new for manufacturers who have been in the space of software as a medical device. And the same applies to the last bucket, I think, which talks about management systems, looking at Article 9, which requires manufacturers to draft up a risk management system, and Article 17, which requires manufacturers to draft up a quality management system. What's also important to say, because this question otherwise might come up later in the Q&A, you see a lot of requirements that you also already know from MDR. So a risk management system, quality management system, technical documentation, let's say as the big documents processes that you need to document and provide evidence for. The AI Act is written in a way where it says if you already have an existing system under your original regulation, you can integrate the requirements that you have out of the AI Act into your already existing quality management system. So if you have a quality management system following 13485, for example, you would have to adapt it in a way where you now integrate the AI-specific roles and topics that are required to be mentioned. And the same for the technical documentation or the risk management. You can still follow this process, but you now have to identify the AI-specific risks. So, but the idea is not to have two separate systems. You now have to draw up two quality management systems or two risk management systems, but you can actually combine it into one. So what to expect next? If we look into the timelines, you'll see that the AI Act has already entered into force 20 days after its application. That was on the 1st of August, 2024. This year, we have already seen that the Article 5 prohibitions have already been put in place. So it's not allowed to put a prohibited system onto the EU market. And Article 4, speaking about AI literacy, is that companies who work with AI are required to make sure there's adequate literacy of the people who are engaged with these AI systems. If the timelines stay as they are, which is currently under debate, the next thing that would come up would be the requirements for general purpose AI systems and the governance and sanctions. And then in August 2026, the AI Act applies to high-risk systems in Annex 3. And then what's most relevant, I think, for most of the people here is August 2027, which is when the AI Act applies to high-risk AI systems under Annex 1A, which is medical devices. So that's maybe good news. Until August 2nd, 2027, the AI Act does not apply to manufacturers of AI medical devices. So you still have time to prepare. And speaking of preparing, this is I think especially probably if you look into these two regulations, a lot of information to take in. And we already have a number of services in our TEF catalog that you are, I think, more than welcome to check out to help you on this journey. We also have one a service that we developed in the TÜV AI Lab, which is free of use. And it's a low threshold classification tool for the risk classes of the AI Act. So if you are unsure if you are a high risk system or in which risk class you would fall, feel free to try it out. You can either scan the QR code here on the screen, or you just search for TÜV AI Risk Navigator. You will find it, and then it guides you through a number of questions and spits out a result at the end telling you into which risk class you fall and why. So thank you very much for your attention.